I was a doctoral student at the University of California in San Diego for 8 years, and I did my doctoral thesis on Radulescu's work, particularly his work for clarinet. To be more specific, the works that use multiple clarinets all at the same time, based on a technique that he called sound plasma, which is a way of treating spectral sound to keep things sort of in motion and morphing and full of energy. So what happens is there is a live clarinet playing, and this sound gets taken and split into its various spectral components. These elements get delayed and pushed around the room, but also copies of the clarinet are also moved around. And so you have one instrument that splits into sort of a multiplicity of things, and then each of these gets deconstructed and morphs and becomes something else. And the idea is that all of these things come together in the center to create sort of like a big ball of acoustic energy. With just intonation and with spectral sound, technically, if you use these techniques perfectly, you're making music that exists in some way outside of time, because the vibrations are all periodic. There's no sense of linearity. Instead, you have a circularity. One of Radulescu's innovations was to try to reinsert instability and chaos into this sort of a system. And so he would create these kind of sonic masses and then deliberately destabilize them. And so I've taken his thinking and I've expanded that further. My goal is to have an experience in which time and space and rhythm and pitch, timbre, are all, and form are all sort of like expressions of the same phenomenon of vibration. This idea is also indebted a little bit to Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, of course, who wrote this article, How Time Passes, wie die Zeit vergeht, which talks about how pitch is just an expression of rhythm operating on a different time scale. And you can extrapolate from that and think also about form as being another expression of pitch. And then you can, if you're thinking about pitch in this way, then you can also think about timbre and how timbre might be an expression actually of an experience of time. And so I try to do all of these things and then compose them into the clarinet, or into the computer rather, and use the clarinet as a tool to get the computer to create this kind of an environment. I have a foot pedal, but it's difficult because I only have 10 buttons, and obviously I'm working with a lot of sounds. For example, with the synthesis part of it, with the number of sine waves I use, it can be anywhere up to 7,000 sine waves playing simultaneously. And so there's a lot of automation, and a lot of this is based on sort of reducing vibrations to like subaudible frequencies, and then using those as like extremely low frequency oscillators, for example, operating at 0.1 or 0.01 or 0.001 hertz, and using those as ways of guiding different musical parameters in large batches, groups of sounds done together. And then I will use the foot pedal to basically control and shape how these unfold over time. I use the spatialization in a couple of ways. So first of all, we have the solo clarinet in the center of stage, and we've used the speakers on stage to create a sort of an effect of there being a clarinet ensemble. So as the clarinet sort of splits and becomes this sort of multiplicity of clarinets, it becomes like a clarinet orchestra, and this is spread out across the stage. These also then get also delayed and shifted around the room, and so we have a sort of bouncing from front to back process that happens. At the same time, as they split into their spectral components, and we have this mass sine wave synthesis stuff, this moves out into the room. And then actually a lot of the spatial effects at this point are created acoustically within the room just through the interaction of tone, more so than by using loudspeakers. And so I'm only actually working with 8 channels of sound, but my hope is that we're creating an extremely dense spatial experience also by the way that they all interact with each other in the way that these move. And yeah, creating Doppler effects and things like that. It's also indebted to Alvin Lucia for this reason. I was interested in experience of time that are almost eternal, but then have been sort of problematized in some kind of way or complicated in some sort of way. My thinking there was the way that things that might appear to be fractal or self-repeating or self-referential or cyclical. If you mutate them in certain ways, you end up always creating something new, but in this sort of still using this cyclical process. So it was about really trying to play with the dynamic between an experience of time that's linear and an experience of time that's vertical. So the unsame is the unsimilarity that happens in repetitions that have been mutated. But it also has a personal meaning for me too, because while I was working on the piece, I got diagnosed with blood cancer, which is a mutation. And so I was thinking a lot about mutation and the way that things change and shift and become other things. And so I was thinking about this sense of a body that is supposed to be ideally sort of recreating itself over and over again, but there's a mutation and then something goes wrong and it becomes something new. But I also think obviously in the case of cancer, that's very bad, but I think this is also a really beautiful process because it means that we're not stuck in these old patterns or habits of the past. I guess it's an expression of our own individual free will is the other thing that I was thinking about there. We always have the chance to become something new, to recreate, to grow, to mutate, if you will.